Okay, guys, if we could begin, that would be fantastic. Assume your positions next to the instructor or wherever you choose.
You get that hint to say that?
Essentially, yeah. So, on Monday, we talked about the Fetch API, right? Remember that? Long time ago, seems. But Aeneas introduced that for us, and she spoke specifically about HTTP GET requests. And the example we looked at was retrieving some JSON data from an open third-party API on the web. Yes, we looked only at GET requests using Fetch. Today, I want to talk about communication the other way around, essentially, sending it from your client's computer, data from your client's computer. Maybe they've entered some form data on the front end or some other form of data, and they want to send that off to, or you want to capture that data in your application. So in other words, we want to send it from client side to server side, and then maybe even then progress to storing it on a database eventually, that data, right? So I want to cover a couple of little things, just forms in general, just a few little form input fields, how we capture the data from the form, and then how we would use the Fetch API to send that form data over to the back end, ready to be stored in a database or whatever. So again, I've created just a very, very small, simple React application. I will share the code with you after the workshop ends. And as you can see, there's not much going on. We've just got our main app component, and then inside there, I'm just using reasonably semantic HTML. So I think one of the questions earlier was, when do we use certain HTML elements? Things like aside or main or all these sorts of things. So I've just used main here rather than using a different div, because it's a little bit more descriptive. Div's very generic, whereas main is just the main section of my application, of my page. So I've put a main tag there rather than a div. Doesn't come with any special syntax, any special CSS rules or highlighting as far as I'm aware, main, but it's just a little bit more descriptive. This is the main part of my application, and in there is the form. So that form is what in React. Do you know what type of? It's a component, definitely, right? So it's been highlighted green, capital F. We've imported it from an external file, and it looks a little something like this. So in terms of the render, how do we expect that to look on the page? So I've used my form tags, and I've enclosed certain things inside of that form. I've got my label, so the user knows what they need to put in each box, essentially. And then I've given each one an ID so that I can easily capture that data later. The whole form has an input, so that when the submit button gets clicked, the whole form object essentially gets submitted, right? Or we can capture data from the form. So what should that look like on the page? Any ideas?
Username, and then you have the input form where you can, as a text.
Yep.
Username, and then next to it, you have the text input form where you can enter the username. And then the same goes for the email. Next to it, you have the email and the text box. Age, the same goes. And input accepts the number. And gender, we have the drop down, in the text again.
Gender's going to be dropped down, is it?
It should be, because there's only.
You're right, it should be. It's not. How would we change it to be a drop down?
Instead of text,
Do you not use field set or
drop down something.
how does field set work? Is it part of?
Field set.
Yeah.
What's that?
Is that part of the forms?
I'm not sure actually. What's field set?
Yeah.
It will look like that. field set element. Oh, okay.
The groups the related data.
Cool. Never used it. Looks useful. Again, one of those more modern semantic HTML elements. Wasn't what I was thinking of in this case. Maybe I could use it, but I probably can't just digest that in time to make a decent workshop out of it now, so I'm going to use what I know. But yeah, thanks for bringing that to my attention. How about select and options?
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
That's what you're thinking of? Yeah?
Select and select, and then you put options inside.
Yeah, so if you look at the syntax for what's going to be best, maybe that one. So instead we could have done an element that looks something like that, right? Rather than having an input and text and just letting the person enter any random data for their gender, then we could have specify some options, right? So let's replace that quickly now so that our form's a little bit better. So we can have a label for gender, and we can have, what was it? Is it option select? I always get confused which way around it is. Select, isn't it? Select box, and then we close the select. Inside of the select, we need some options. What options shall we give? So yeah, we can just give an M. Oh, come on. Should we give an other just to offer something else? I'm not going to get into the gender debate here, right, on YouTube, but yeah, so I'm just going to leave it as other for now, and hopefully people can raise awareness that way by selecting other, right? Cool. So I still need my input submit. I think the rest is fine. Let's have a look, see what that should look like now. So, doesn't seem to be a drop down box. Is it actually running? No. How do I want to run an application that runs both a front end and a back end in this case. What do I need to just double check probably before I use my commands? Yeah, I want to maybe have a look at my scripts, right, and see what script command to run. Where would those scripts be located? Package.json, fantastic. Well done, guys. You're on the ball today. Got some comments, I like it. Keep it up. So, would it be start in this case? Probably not, right? There's one called start all. We're using the npm run all module to start a couple of servers in parallel, both the front end and the back end. So it looks like I need to run npm run start all to make sure both of my servers are running. Okay, I'll just type it. Yeah, but I know that I'm going to have a back end, so I just want to start it up now, right? To save stopping and starting servers later on. So when we load that up, now we can clearly see that we've got 3 input boxes. And now we've got the option to select our gender, right? Rather than just enter something. When that data has been entered, we can hit submit. Oh, I seem to have just some very, very basic HTML validation on there, which we spoke about the other day, right? When you were designing your calculator apps, can we actually just write things in HTML to make it warn us if we try and submit invalid data? So this submit is essentially not submitted anything because the data wasn't there, and we prevented it from submitting it and just given a basic warning to the user, right? Please fill in this field. So you'll remember Porik, nickname's Chewy, but let's say if we just put Chewy in there as well, let's say Chewy's really old for now. So we've also got some other validation on there. So the email box only lets you submit emails. It's very, very...
You used input type email, is that why?
Because I've used, yep, exactly. So this is why. If we go back to our application, rather than form specifically, we can see that I've used type equals email on that. And why did it not let me leave the username blank? Well, because I put this required keyword there as well. Yeah, so these are just all words that are built into the input label and the input tag. And we can use these to restrict data that users can enter in forms. So I've also restricted the age, so it has to be a number, and it's a bit unfair to people above 100, but whatever. I've restricted it for now for ages between 0 and 100. Alright?
Probably someone older than 100 will not be using a computer.
Maybe, but we can't assume that, right? If they're over 100, they might not use a computer. They also might use a computer. So,
Smart answer.
Or maybe a relative wants to register them all.
or a relative wants to register. Yeah, lots of use cases, right, guys? Anyway, let's focus again back on the forms. So now, because of my minimum and maximum there, it's saying the value must be less than 100, right? So just by putting that little tiny bit of code, at least I've got some basic validation on my form as well. Yeah. And if I tried to enter a number again, sorry, a non-number, so if I tried to type something, typing now and nothing's happening. I can do the weird E because it's technically a constant, right? We worked that out the other day, mathematical constant, but yeah, I can't do any other symbols in there. Cool, so let's just say he's eternally 21 and we're going to submit him as a male Wookiee. Then coming back into my app, that's essentially my form done. But what I want to happen, when someone clicks on that submit button, I want to send that data to the back end. How would I do that? Any ideas? Say what, sorry? Post, yeah, I like that. So we're going to use the HTTP post request as part of the fetch method. So you can see that I've called an onSubmit event. I've called a handle submit handler when the onSubmit event is triggered there. Yeah. So when we click this button, our code will jump up to our handle submit event. I prevented the default so that I can handle things myself. I've extracted some information from the form. It's not necessarily the only way to do it, but it's just one way I know you're familiar with at this stage, right? We can use some HTML selectors to get the element by ID in this case. So they've all been labeled up with a user, an email, an age. Have we still got the one for gender, or did we delete it? Nope, so we should. Yeah, is that gonna get it correctly? We'll find out, right, using the select. I don't know whether it will get it correctly using the select. Then
What's the prevent default?
So submit has its own default action, right? It will try and send something somewhere straight away. I've just said, hang on, I want to structure some information first, and then I'll tell you when to send stuff. So I'm just preventing its default behavior. Each event has a default behavior. Like we looked at clicking on a link, a Google link in a past workshop, and we said prevent default, so the link didn't actually go anywhere. Do you remember that? So we prevented a link from doing its default behavior. So this is doing the same thing, preventing a submit event from submitting straight away. Yeah. Cool. So I just essentially want to collect all of that data from the form. Here I've just stored it in an object. So I've used object destructuring to store it in an object. And then I'm just logging it out to check that I've got all the data that I want. And then I write my fetch request. And it's not that much different. It's still a fetch, and it's still got a path. However, it's got a second argument here. So we've got a comma, and we've essentially sent in an object. This is often called the options object. Notice that we've got method post in there. So that now means we're doing a post request, a HTTP post request. I've told the browser what type of data we're sending, which is a really useful thing to do and can help prevent some errors. So I've told it we're sending JSON data. Yeah, we're sending JavaScript object notation data. How do I know we're doing that? Well, I'm stringifying, JSON.stringifying the body before sending as well. Yeah, so we're stringifying our JSON object, sticking it in the body of our request.
Anywhere in the backend?
Anywhere in the body? What do you mean anywhere in the body? The body is just going to be a value, so it's not the HTML body, it's the body of the request. Do you remember when Anais showed us what we were getting back as our response object, and it had a huge number of properties, right? But the body said it was a readable stream, which meant we could extract the JSON data from that body of our response. So we're doing something similar, but the other way around, right? We're turning it into stringified JSON data and then sending it across our network to the backend. So that's about as simple as you could write it, but there are additional options that you could send to fetch as well. There's obviously additional data types that you could send. You don't have to send JSON data. I'm just doing that because it's quite simple to handle and pass. Some of you in your team apps might want to send images. So there's a nice article there. If I zoom in a little bit, you could tell your application that you were sending an image across, maybe a JPEG image, a PNG, whatever. And we're essentially doing this one, right? Application JSON data. JavaScript object is what we're sending over. Cool. Let's actually click on submit and see if we can get some data sent over. So hopefully now both our front end and our back end are running. I can definitely see my front end is running. I haven't got any console.log application listening. Did I set one up? I did, so let's see. So if I open my console just to check and see if I've got the correct request, the correct body before I send it across would be good. So in the console, when I click submit, let's try and make this a little bit bigger. Okay, nice. So on the front end, on the front end at least, my body has been set up correctly. I've got an object storing my data, user, age, email, and gender. Has it gone to the back end? Well, that's what we need to find out. So this is my client side front end code. And what I'm hoping is the fetch request went through. Again, we could check that on the network tab. And if we have a look at our back end, we've set up a route handler for our back end as well. So this time, rather than using app.get, we use app.post. Yeah, when a post request is sent to REST store user. Why REST store user? Because that's where the fetch request is posting the data to. Then again, for now, I'm just going to console.log that information out just to check that our incoming request to our backend contains the same data as what we sent from the front end. So how do I know that it's gone through? Well, I can just check my Node application and I should see request body is user Auric blah 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 blah, right? So our data has definitely transferred itself from the front end to the back end. Then, of course, I could go on to do many other things with that. I could connect to a database, insert it in a database collection, and do things like that. I'm not going to cover the databases now because I want to focus on databases solely really next week, just so that we can get our heads around that. But that would be the first step, right? We would post the data to the back end. Once we're happy that it's getting to the back end, we can then connect to our database and insert it into the database. And then we do the whole cycle backwards, right? From the database to the back end to the front end again to retrieve the data. So we'll look at all that next week, but for a Friday, that's probably too much for you, right? It might blow your minds for a while. And first, it'd be nice for a few of you to get some databases set up, and then we can really play around with a bit of data. Any questions, though, on the process that we've done there, from the front end to the back end especially?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Ahmed.
I did understand up to the headers, line 15, 16,
Yeah.
up 17, but after that line 18, still I don't understand.
Okay, so
You made that body up in here, or is it coming from somewhere else?
so body is the word that we give to the bit of data that we want to send, really. Yeah. So whenever you send a HTTP request, it will contain a body attribute.
And you made it up in here. Is
Um,
that right or
So look what it is.
Yeah.
So the body is set to calling the JSON.stringify method on post body.
Yeah.
Post body is a destructured object based on the variable. Yeah, you understand all this?
Yeah, that I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the issue?
The issue is that body, where does it come from? I don't know. So you made it up.
So I've just said every single HTTP request that you send or receive will have a body attribute on it. Yeah? So I'm just making sure I put my data inside of that section, which is just the way it's done. And then I can retrieve it the other end on the server by doing request.body, and then specifically I was just going to send back the data of the user there, but I just logged to the console the whole request body. Yeah?
Could we replace body by header?
Not header, but could you maybe replace it by another word? I don't know whether it will let me set anything. I think it will have to already be predefined as part of it, but let's try. I'll use your name then, Bilal. I assume there's not a Bilal property on most fetch requests, but we never know. And then on the other end, can we do request.bilal? I've never tried, believe it or not, but I don't think it will work.
Oh, wait, one more change.
Where?
Respond.send.
Yeah, we're not really using that at this stage, so it's okay. Oh, you're saying it might throw an error? Yeah, it might do. Yeah. Age blur?
37.
What? Really? So the front end is obviously creating our correct sorry, that's the back end. So front end, we've got post body, console.post body, JSON.stringify post body. Yes, the front end obviously works, but is the back end getting anything? No, it's empty, right? Request body is empty. So request.bilal, no such thing. We couldn't successfully store any data in there. Yeah.
I don't exist.
You don't exist in terms of fetch objects, but hopefully you exist here now. Yeah. So these keys need to refer to your usual response and request objects. Yeah. Body is definitely defined as our headers and methods. These are valid options that we can give it. Below is, unfortunately, is not a valid option yet in the fetch spec.
Maybe in the next iteration.
Maybe in the next iteration they will realize the error of their ways and add a below key. Yeah?
I'm not sure.
Good stuff. Other questions, guys?
No, I understand.
Yep.
In the server.js,
Yep.
so line 13,
13. Yeah.
so the response that you're sending is the user's name, or so the body.user,
Yep.
and then
I was sending that back, and then so that's only gonna get sent. But yeah, let's have a look where that's going on the network. I think I'm insulting you now, everyone will. Don't ask the age. Yeah. And what did we do? No, so that's store user. There we go. So that's what comes back, right? Just your username from the store user route. So that's gone full circle. It's sent all of this data to the back end, and then we've popped back just the username of the person. So we might have retrieved that from a database, right? But I was just showing you that it can be two-way communication, right? And then of course, if I wanted to latch onto that, I could write some front-end code to pull that data out, display it on the page, all those sorts of things. But I didn't do that at this stage. I just wanted to concentrate on the post request itself. Yeah, but it's getting sent over the network, so the same way as you first looked at your fetch request coming over the network in CodeFlix, then you stored that in a variable and mapped over it, right, to display it on your page. You could do the same thing with what's getting sent back there. And let's see, if you look at their things like the headers and yeah, so that was the payload, right, that went. So all the data went, for whatever reason we just decided to send back the user. If I decided to send back the age, I'm hoping I can just resubmit. We've got a second store user appeared. If I click on that now, it still says Skelly. Why? Yes, so body dot age. It's a bit strange. Let's go with Daviday now. Daviday's getting old. Don't know what's quite happened there. Maybe I'm not running a hot. I must be running a hot server, right? Let's do it again. Okay, now I'm getting the age. I don't know why I had to kill my server and start it again for those changes to be reflected in DevTools, but that's the way it is, right? To the age, yep, that's all we did, right? That was just a small change that we did just to show what network data we could get back as well. We could send back part of that data after it was received. Yeah,
Why has it been called store user in
because that's the route that it came from. Yeah. So that could be changed as well, of course. Yeah. I make too many changes, I'm just going to break it completely.
The other one we had shows.
The other one you had rest shows, exactly, yep. So what did it come back as? It came back as shows, didn't it, when you looked for it in the network tab? Yeah.
And we made it up on the spot anyway, the shows. When we used after.cat, we made it up anyway, and the rest of the shows also have anyway in there.
Of course you could, yeah, you could have any name, but it's a good idea to make it descriptive of what it's returning. So store user actually isn't very good, is it, for what I'm sending back? You'd probably say get user aid or return user aid or something.
It's kind of like standard for
So REST is the architecture, isn't it, that we're using? It's the design pattern for creating APIs. Yeah, create a RESTful API. Yeah. Cool. Anything else? Any questions from Jack on Slack? Anyone? No, nothing. Cool. So I will send that code. It's more useful if obviously you just take it and play around with it. I mean, it's more just an introduction, and then hopefully.
I want to play around with this right now.
How can you play around with it?
I want to create something like this on my system.
It's going to send it to you.
No, but you send me the code. I want to be able to create. So I need to create React app, right? Just like
You want to do it from scratch?
Sure, yeah. Because I want
Yeah. So just do a new create React app.
Same process that we've done all the apps.
and
cre-
do everything
Create a form or create something that you can do a fetch request from.
from
Yeah, and then do some sort of post version of fetch, and make sure you set up a route on your backend that matches that route that you're trying to fetch from, and then handle your post method in some way. Yeah, they're the main steps. Okay, but I'll send the code anyway. Hopefully you can adapt that to use in your team apps a little bit for getting data to the back end, and then the next step on Monday will be to connect it to a database, I guess, or when you guys are ready. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll do it. This week.
fantastic. All right, I will leave it there. Cheers.